Hey everybody, welcome to the GarageCast. Today we are going to be doing the typical film podcast. The typical film podcast, you might notice that I am distinctly not Sergio. Sergio is... Where is it, Sergio?
Vacation. Either in Mexico or LA, I think, or San Diego.
So if you're looking to find Sergio, he's in Mexico or LA. He's on vacation, so he couldn't make it for this one. Instead, I am the person doing the intro. My name is Marty. It's very nice to meet you. I know you've never seen me before, but it's wonderful to meet all you wonderful viewers. Hi, Angela. I know you watch these. Today we are going to be doing our podcast on the 2015 film The Lobster, directed by Yorgos Lanthimos. Believe it or not, his first film in English. Before this, he had made Greek language films because, as you could tell by the name, Yorgos Lanthimos, he is Greek.
I couldn't.
Well, now you know he's Greek. It's a bit of an odd one, bit of a weird one, a big departure from the other movies that have been discussed on this podcast. Yeah. Very kind of like artsy, very small scale, very personal. It's basically a psychological thriller, almost comedy drama thing about relationships. It's basically just like a deep dive into marriage and being in relationships and being single and that kind of experience. It's super absurd, super dark, kind of funny in a dark way, right? I think we're going to talk about a lot of this stuff.
There's a lot of scenes that seem like they're supposed to be funny, but also seem like they should not be funny.
Exactly, right? There's a lot of stuff.
Why am I laughing at this? Am I a terrible person?
Exactly, right. I think it's definitely... well, and I think we can talk a little bit more about this eventually, but I feel like it's definitely a movie that's trying to get you to be introspective. You know, it's definitely wants you to confront the questions that it presents on your own, I feel like.
I feel very introspective right now.
Very introspective right now. Very big introspective mood. So here's some interesting facts and tidbits about the movie before we get into it. So shot primarily on long lenses. I know some of you have taken film classes before, but which is actually really different from the first movie that most of us have seen from him, which is The Favorite, which came out in 2018. A lot of wide lenses in that one, so like blown out faces and like these crazy like fisheye lens shots. This one, the exact opposite, a lot of landscape shots, a lot of long lenses, right? No makeup at all, and no artificial lighting if they had to use diegetic lighting. So like they used the lamps in the hotel, they used the outside lighting. They didn't like color correct anything. If they did color correct anything, it was just to make it kind of like that more monotone gray palette that seems to just like be throughout this movie. But yeah, stars Colin Firth, Rachel Weisz, Léa Seydoux, a lot of really good actors. And if you've seen the movie, you know, spoilers obviously, but if you've seen the movie, then you know that it kind of ends away. It has a bit of an ending to it. So I think we're going to start actually at the ending, believe it or not. Yes. If you've seen the movie, you'll know what we're talking about. If not, go watch it. It's on Netflix right now. But let's just get right into it. Do you think he did it?
I don't know.
Yes.
Yeah, right?
I think he did.
I'm going to say a hard no.
I'm going to say
so we
no
got
too,
a
actually.
maybe, a yes, and a no, and a
I
no.
think he did.
You think he did?
Yeah.
Why?
Well, because like you could see him desperately trying to like find a way to attach to someone. Like in the movie, he attached to like the meanest and like just weirdest person in the hotel, just by like trying to act like he had no emotion. So I feel like just out of his desperation, I feel like he did it.
But at the same time, my argument against that is that he hates I think John is his name, the leg guy, the guy with the
limp,
the limp. Yes, the guy with the limp. He hates that he pretends to have the nosebleed. Like maybe that's just like a jealousy thing, but like he's supposed to go like take care of them, right? Yeah. And he literally just goes and like he's faking, by the way, and then dips. So that's why like I think he hates the idea of changing himself in order to fit into relationships so much so that he even goes back to the guy, right? And then John with the limp, but he tries it with the crazy lady, the lady with no heart, and then hates it. So I think like that idea is so repulsive to him that he just like couldn't do it.
Yeah, I could see it.
And just like visually, like in that last shot, because like I feel like, you know, when it's just that last shot of her sitting at the dining table, I want to like dissect it so badly that every time I watch it, I'm like, what's going on in the back? Like, what can I get that means something? And there's like an old couple that walks away from her, like behind her, which makes me think like that's not going to happen, right? Like the old couple, like the possibility of them being married for a long time is going. It's out the door, right? But that's, I don't know, that might just be me really reading into this shot, right?
Well, what I noticed about it, because I was doing the same thing when, because also that last scene kind of like is very tense because like I don't want to see him put a knife through his eye.
Yeah, right.
And it comes very close to that, and then I'm like, I was waiting for it to cut back to the bathroom, or waiting for like just some like screaming to start happening.
Or even like a door closing or something,
Yeah.
like some kind of cue that like we have some.
There's examples of the movie going there too,
Right,
like the
yeah.
woman falling out and bleeding everywhere. Like the movie has those gruesome, and the dog is
Yeah.
a very gruesome
Yeah.
image. So the idea of him stabbing his eye out on camera, it's not
Isn't
too
far-fetched.
far-fetched.
Yeah.
And if he was going for, if the director was a worse director, I think he would have done it for the shock value. I like how he did it here though, because now we're talking about it,
Right,
Exactly.
and that's the point.
It's up for interpretation.
Yeah, and but what I was gonna say is I was kind of waiting for that, but I was also trying to pay attention to what was going on in the background as well, because I was like, I'll just say it's a construction site in the background,
Yeah.
which means they're constructing something, which could, again, might be reading too much into it, but it could mean that they're constructing something, and it means that the characters are constructing something.
Yeah, they're kind of like building.
Yeah.
The whole time I was watching this movie, I couldn't help but think about this joke. And this joke from Gerard Carmichael's last stand-up special, which is like my favorite. Like I basically base my whole worldview off that. Like it's like one of those things. Like I'm so obsessed with it.
Religion to you.
It's like currently like my current Bible. But he has a thing there where he's like. And he's like, it's like super serious. It's gonna sound super serious, but he says it in a way that's really funny. But he's like, I just hope everyone knows here that love is built on lies, right? And like that's like I couldn't help but like think about that. The joke he makes is that's the name of my new jazz album, by the way. Love is built on lies. That's a really funny joke, right? But at the same time, it's like a very insightful, like you kind of gotta lie about some things in order to kind of like start and like that seems to be a major theme of this. Like, what are we willing to lie about? What are we willing to do for love, for relationships and stuff like that?
And in this movie, it brings up a lot of instances where, like, why would you do that for, like, stabbing his eyes out? What purpose is that outside of the fact that in this society, they believe that you need to have this, like, obscure thing in common in order for something to work out? And in reality, like, obviously we don't need to be, like, me and my girlfriend don't need to be short-sighted for us to have a good relationship.
Yeah, exactly.
So this whole idea of him wanting to stab his eyes out to make this work, it's absurd to begin with, because it's not going to help their relationship at all. They're just going to be two blind people wandering the city.
So I think that to add to that, there's a scene in the beginning that immediately I wrote down, like, the main character is very confused by everything going on around him. And it's the scene where he is first checking into the hotel, which to me, watching the movie for the first time, was very confusing to me too, because I was like, where the fuck is he that he needs to give all this information? And they get to his sexuality preference, and then he's like, I prefer women, and then he's like, but I did have a homosexual experience, and he's like, is there an option for bisexual? And they're like, no, and then he's like, oh, I don't know what to pick. And it's like, it's this very, like, and obviously, like, sexuality is something that can be very confusing, and so for him, it's that's what's confusing to him. But I feel like it's kind of shown throughout. Everyone that's at this hotel is very confused, and they're looking for someone to tell them what to do.
And society is giving them those boundaries. They're like, no, there's no bisexual option. In our society, we don't accept bisexuality, so you have to choose one or the other. And no middle ground here.
Yeah, this is definitely a movie built on, like, binaries, right? Like extremes.
Yeah.
Very little, like, nuance in the film. The place where I would say is, like, the most nuanced is the hotel. It's, like, literally the one space that's kind of, like, between the wilds and, like, the city, right? The city where everyone's a couple, and the wilds where everyone's, like, single. There's, like, a hotel where people are single, but they're looking for people, and they, like, go on these hunts, right?
It's like a reflection area for people living in this fucked up society.
Yeah, right.
So people can slow down, and I think that's why everybody in this hotel is dealing with such, like, existential crisis.
Well, also the fact that another major thing in the movie, right? You have 45 days until you're turned into an animal.
Oh yeah, did we not mention that?
What the fuck is that?
yeah, right. It's interesting. You brought up earlier, or I forget, but someone brought up earlier that it's not necessarily clear whether or not, I think Cameron said it, that they are going to be turned into animals. It might just be like a ploy where it's like, oh, don't worry, we're going to take care of them, and then they just like give an animal so that these people have like the loved one to carry on in a way. I thought that was interesting, but at the same time, I kind of liked like the absurd idea of like where you either just are married or you're an animal.
It's kind of like, it's weird to say that because like you're by yourself and then just all of a sudden you're an animal. Like it's I want to say it's like savage. Like you're a savage if you're by yourself. Like
that's what I was thinking too. Is it's like I feel like that again is a thing that this director doesn't like the way that relationships are done in common society, and I think that's very clear in this movie. And I think that is a part of it that he's trying to say, like that our society deems people who don't want relationships as savages, and that's why I think like the like orderly like hotel that has all the rules and regulations, even though it's not very like whatever the opposite word of savage would be, I don't know.
Civilized?
Yeah, civilized. Yeah. It's not very civilized. Like for like when the I don't know the actor's name, but the guy from Step Brothers.
Oh, John C. Reilly. Like one of the best words.
Wonderful, wonderful actor.
So good.
He when he gets caught masturbating and they burn his hand.
That shit
that was
so
so
crazy.
fucked
That was so fucked
That's another
Forgot
example
about
of
that.
them showing them like that horrible thing. So when he's with the knife in his eye, you're like, oh, we could do that. Yeah.
Everybody was so calm about it. That's what I thought was fucked up. It's just like this, like he's screaming in pain. Everyone's just having their breakfast, like nothing else is happening. Like just looking forward, doing nothing.
It's a big another big thing in this movie. I feel like is juxtapositions between images, like a guy getting his hand burned in a toaster, being forcibly burned in a toaster, in this like really nice like upscale.
Like while everyone's having breakfast.
Everybody's having a beautiful day.
And like one of the main things that I noticed that in was they had the like ballroom scene or whatever where they're all like dancing, and it's like in the first one, because I think we get it like 2 or 3 more times or something like that. But the very first ballroom scene, they're all like dancing, like doing whatever. I would say having a good time, but it's not.
It doesn't. It doesn't look like
having a good time.
Yeah, exactly. That's like a thing where it's like you're gonna have fun. Like it's like the mom at Disneyland. Like you're gonna have fun. God damn it.
You're gonna find someone to spend the rest of your life with, and you're gonna settle down. And
and it's like, but then they have that, and like the imagery there is like very fancy and like upscale, and like obviously it's not that. But it's like supposed to be like a very nice setting, and then you get the air raid horn, and then the very next shot is them inside of the bus with all the guns.
Well, even just like the idea of like the air raid, because you would just assume because it's like a social event, it's like a ball where they're dancing and there's music, that it's at night, right? And it's lit to the point where you're like, oh, it's nighttime. But then they open up the blinds and it's like bright, and then everyone's just like getting ready to go in the sun. You're like, wait, what?
What the fuck just happened?
Yeah, and it's very like performative, right? I think that relates back to what I was saying about Gerard Carmack, where it's like love is built on lies. Like it can feel like relationships in this kind of like hierarchical, where it's like you have to get married because of tax purposes and because you know everyone else does it because you know like all of these reasons.
You must relate to all the other people that are coupled. So if you don't do this, you can't relate to people, and you're pretty much a broken person. That's
exactly right. You have to have this one thing in common that the only you two have in common, right? It's a very performative thing a lot of times in relationships like that. Right, where there's all these rules in place, you kind of have to like perform, and it's funny that the main people that we get who enforce these rules, the manager played by Olivia Colman, one of my favorite actresses, like they literally are up there dancing and singing, and like
that
doing that awkward little dance. So
no
funny.
Emotion in either of their faces. Like, they're just like reading the lines.
And we even see, right? He's like, "Fucking I'll kill her."
This whole movie, there was like no emotion. Though. They just like they don't really show emotion in general. It's like everybody just has like this plain face, and like this is just very normal for them. Like it's just like when the guy with the limp just turned around, like it's very monotone, and it's just like it's very casual. But like, there's no emotion whatsoever. He's just like, "Oh, you want to go on a walk with us or something like that?" It's like, "Would you like to go on a walk with us?" Yeah. And like that's it. Like nothing else.
This is my friend. We just met.
And then his response.
I think that was I know before we started watching the movie, you were talking about how like the way that the dialogue is done is similar to the way that like Quentin Tarantino does his dialogue. Not in the sense that it's similar to that specifically, but that there's a style to it.
Absolutely. And it's even in The Favorite to some extent. A little less so in The Favorite. But if you watch his other one, Killing of a Sacred Deer, it's the same thing where it's just very like monotone, like deadpan is probably the best word for it, where it's just like serious without emotion, right?
And I think it fits the whole tone of the movie too, because everybody's in a very contemplative state where they're really trying to manipulate someone into being in a relationship with them so they don't have to be turned into an animal.
Yeah.
So everybody's very like to themselves thinking, and then okay, here's my chance. And then like the guy who made himself with the nosebleed.
Yeah.
He saw like, okay, she's swimming, she's gonna have a moment here, and then he's like, okay, I'm gonna get into character, and then he gets into character, goes to her, gives him his line, finds out about the nose thing, and then he makes it happen. He forces himself into her life, and she's okay with it because she doesn't want to be turned into an animal either. So she was
naive. She was naive. She didn't know what was happening like the entire time until
that also kind of goes back to the thing of like, I feel like all the characters are a little bit confused about what they're supposed to be doing, because like with her character, whether she was naive or whether she was okay with it, when we get the scene in the boat where the main character comes down and he's lying about the nosebleed.
David.
David. When he's like when he comes in and he basically just like tells her everything about what he was not supposed to tell her, and then she grabs the knife anyways and like holds it to him, but you could tell that she's like unsure, which is good acting on her part, but you can tell that she's confused, she doesn't know what she's supposed to be doing, but like this is the thing that society says to do, which is like, we live in a society.
we live in a fucking society.
And this guy's rocking the boat. I don't like this guy. Kill him.
Yeah.
Like nobody rock the boat.
Which also, since the kid is there, I also want to talk about the funniest joke in the movie to me, which was, if you guys are arguing, we'll give you a kick. Yeah. That usually fixes it.
We'll assign you a child. That usually fixes things. So funny. Again, Olivia Colman, Queen, like best delivery. About that scene though, one thing that I noticed is and the costume design like throughout this movie is like super. I feel like you could really read into the way people are dressed.
Sure.
But in the theme, like it's like they're wearing like prison jumpsuits. They're wearing like the striped black and white. But also it's kind of like the black and white where it's like one or the other, right? Yeah. Whereas he's like wearing kind of like the blue and the gray.
They're kind of viewed as just broken subhumans. If you're single and you're in this hotel, you're a broken person who needs to be fixed.
Absolutely. There's something wrong. To go back to like the no emotion, like the affect that they kind of put on in the Yorgos Lanthimos movies, I think this kind of relates back to something I mentioned at the very beginning, which is like these long lenses, right? And you guys have taken film classes, for those of you who haven't, basically long lenses are really good for landscape shots. There's a lot of really beautiful landscape shots in this movie. But basically they are distant. They're good for catching things far away, catching wide views and stuff like that, whereas something that's wider, a wider angle lens will blow out a face or kind of like have more back and forth movement and stuff like that. It'll be more emphasized. One thing that's really good about the long lens is that it detaches you from the story, right? Same thing with the way the dialogue is delivered, the affect that they put on, and same thing honestly with like the colors. And there's a lot about this movie that's trying to get you detached from it, so that way you're looking at it like objectively. You're thinking about these things, right? We're getting to talk about things like relationships, the performativeness of it, the way society forces people to be in relationships, the way society alienates people who aren't in relationships and stuff like that, because that's what the movie wants us to do in a way. It's like, okay, yes, here's Colin Firth, yes, here's Rachel Weisz, yes, here's like a sex scene, but don't participate in it, like look at it, right? Really think about like how awkward this sex scene is, or like how like, and I also feel like the music goes a long way, especially like when he's with the heartless lady. I forget if she has a name, but like the whole time, like the music there is just like, you're just like dreading. He's like, you're with him in that he's just like, fuck, like I really hope she doesn't find out. And
I have to do this for the rest of my life. I can't even handle like a week of this.
God, that was so crazy.
I forgot to set the timer.
That's alright. We'll just go based on the cameras. So going to the heartless lady, I would like to talk about the suicide scene. The Butterbiscuit lady.
The scene where he meets the messed up lady, right? Okay.
Butterbiscuit lady.
Well, no, because they were like in the narration, like apparently he's been talking to her beforehand, trying to like weasel himself into
Oh,
her.
okay.
Like,
So
No, no,
he's been working on her for a little bit before. Okay.
He used a suicide attempt as his opportunity.
Here's
Well,
my-
yeah.
Well, a lot like the pool scene. Like the kid was like, "Here's my opportunity. I'm gonna swing
Yeah,
in," and then
same.
so they're looking for, they're contemplative, and then someone jumped out of a window. This is my chance.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Very transactional. Everything is very just like,
Yeah.
okay, here's what I can get. Here's what you got. Let's get
And I think this also kind of gives us a chance to talk about like the comedy, the like sort of comedy, but not really in this movie, where like we get this image of the lady who said she was going to commit suicide if she didn't find somebody, laying in the middle of the like courtyard or whatever with blood coming out of her head and the butter biscuits all over the floor. And we're like, okay, she's dead. She committed suicide. And then we hear this like
It's not
screaming.
funny. The thing is, it's really not.
why did she have it with her? She just decided to jump off with it.
Yeah, she decided to jump with the butter biscuits.
Well, that was the butter biscuits, though. We could unpack that too. The butter biscuits were a part of her identity. That's what she like. Everybody was using these little things as like their limited identity, so they can easily like if it's too much, that people aren't going to relate to me, and I won't find someone. So I have to simple it down as much as I can. So the
Who
butter
doesn't like
biscuits,
butter biscuits?
yeah. And she's like, "Oh, you have a dog. Your brother's a dog. I have butter biscuits. We're a match."
Yeah.
And
that's how limited her identity is.
Yeah.
Well,
So
she was
sad.
she was also like the character who's most just like looking for someone, right? And just like please, like talk about pick me, right? Like like literally just like please pick me. Like I'll give you a blowjob.
Yeah.
Please.
Yeah. Oh, yeah,
I'm
she
gonna
was
cry.
Yeah.
Yeah, like and then
That was just an awkward scene.
yeah, oh yeah, and the other thing that comes up in that scene is he's really good at coming up with excuses, right? Which kind of like comes up later. But back to the comedy, right? Like, cause like you said, right? At first you see it and you're like, oh, she did. So you're like, oh, red butter biscuits lady. But then you hear her screaming.
Yeah.
And then you find out that she jumped from the first floor and you're like, butter biscuits lady, what are you doing?
Get to the third floor, please. Get to the third floor.
Well, it was like, so the thing about that scene is so you start to hear the screaming, and like me being someone who hasn't seen the movie before, I'm under the assumption that somebody saw her jump and is now
I
screaming.
had forgotten that it was her too.
Yeah.
And that's interesting too, because in reality, that's what would happen.
Right.
But in this weird, fucked up society, nobody shows anything about it. No, it's just, oh, she killed herself. Yeah, of course she killed herself.
So
It's probably a common thing. She's probably not the only person that's done that.
Day, yeah.
Honestly.
So
She's like, I've got another jumper. Shit.
so anyways, we hear the screaming, and I'm under the assumption that also another thing about this movie is there's a lot of like really long shots, like that just
They let
sit on
you
the
feel
same
it,
thing for a really long time, an uncomfortable amount of time. And it doesn't even have to be someone laying in the pool of their own blood. It can be something as simple as just like someone's face or someone standing in a hallway.
And the
it's
final
just, like,
scene too, with the
yeah,
she's sitting there.
but anyways, so you hear the screaming and you're under the assumption that it's someone else freaking out about this lady that just jumped out. And then as the camera just sits there, you're like, oh no, that's her.
Oh, that's her.
Yeah. And then it's like it makes you really uncomfortable. And then it just cuts to David. Yeah, it just cuts to David, and he's like, man, I wish you would shut the fuck up.
I'm gonna try to lay it down.
Yeah.
And it's like the thing where it's like that's his end, right?
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah,
this is
that's
like
his
this is my
opportunity,
opportunity to show how heartless I am. And even he, like, it's interesting to think about like the performativeness of it all, because he's thinking about like his lines, right? Oh, the next time we go hunting, I'm gonna say like, you should kill him.
Yeah.
And he's done all this. He's been working on her for a while, right? So he knows that she's chosen to be emotionless within this setting, which is of course you would make that jump, because you don't want to really be a part of how fucked up things are. You don't want to feel what the society is around you. So no emotions. That's a solution.
Yeah, it's like he's like, okay, I guess I'll just be emotionless like her, right? Like I'll just detach myself from the whole situation. But then you find out that like he can't do that, right? Like
No, he can't.
like he has these attachments. Like he cares about things.
She was like testing him. So like there was the spa scene where she practically like she choked herself, or like she like pretended to die right in front of him.
Yeah.
And like you kind of see him like he leaned
there's
forward a little
where he's
bit,
like about to,
but then he just leaned back and was just waiting. And then she's like, she wakes up after like she's supposedly done. She's like, all right, we're a match.
Yeah.
And then one more test.
Well, here's the thing that I think is interesting to talk about. Like, so there's these absurd situations, right? it's heightened, it's extreme, it's all of these things. But at the same time, like, how is that different from like someone not texting you because they want you to text them first?
Yeah.
Like it's still a test, right? It's not as extreme as someone swallowing an olive to like choke themselves. But they're still like, okay, the person who I'm interested in, my match does these things. I'm not going to do these things specifically because I want the person I match with to do these things. Like, how is that any different, right?
Yeah.
It's the same basic concept, just in a more heightened, extreme, absurd scale.
And that's something I found interesting because like there's like two separate worlds in this movie. There's the couples worlds, and then I forget what they call them, the loners.
I think they're loners.
Yeah. And then the loners world. And something that I took notice of right away is that the loners are all like super like hard. Like they're all really tough and like the dig your own grave idea, you know? Like that was something that I was like, okay, so this is trying to show how the people who are in single by choice typically are also people that try to project themselves as like really tough and really like out there, you know, and like don't give a shit what you think and don't need anybody.
They also don't have all the conveniences and comforts that people in a hotel would. So like I think there's a theme of survivalism in this movie. Survivalism in terms of what you have to do to survive in a society and what you have to do to survive as a loner in a forest.
Right.
And I think it shows those two really well and kind of the extremes that both have to go to just to get along in this dystopian future.
But what's interesting is that in both, right, there seems to be that detachment is the common theme, right? Because there's that scene where just some random loner gets his leg trapped in a bear trap, right?
Oh,
and,
yeah.
Well, like legs is a big thing. Like for some reason, like the first half of this movie is all about legs. But he gets his leg, and then everyone's just like looking at him, and she's like, "Okay, well, if you can get out, you know, we're gonna be marching that way. If not,
you're on your own.
Yeah, go put yourself in the grave you dug."
Yeah.
Like it's still that extreme, right? No one in this movie seems to actually genuinely care for another person, except for David and Rachel Weisz's character, whose name I don't remember. That seems to be like the one time that there seems to be like genuine affection.
And they form real communication. That's the only time that you see real communication between two characters. Like real love language coming out
literally
in the midst of
literally their sign language is like what they put the arm behind their back and it's like let's fuck.
Let's do this. But they can talk without saying anything and they can stay covert, and it shows, to me anyway, it shows that human connection is a must. And just knowing that another human being is feeling similar things that you're feeling is a must, and I think this movie tackles that idea pretty well.
I think it also comes up with one thing I noticed in the beginning is that you can't both sides are like very different. They're both trying to apply a system to relationships, which doesn't work. And I think that the both with the couples and with the loners, the system that they apply is what ruins the relationships in the first place.
It's an oppressive system
because the system is the reason that the guy bashes his nose every day to try and be like this other person, as opposed to two people like, I mean, they still do the whole like farsighted thing, but as opposed to two farsighted people just meeting and hitting it off, right? Or nearsighted.
Nearsighted.
They're nearsighted.
Yeah.
Well, what's interesting to me about that is that the main characters both had to kind of like experience each one, or at least David, we had to like see him. He had to experience this like being like actively looking for a relationship and actively trying to be separate from everyone before he could finally like find that connection that he was actually looking for, right? Like it was only when they were both trying to be independent that they like were like, oh, they found each other and they like connected over this thing and they developed that language and everything, right? That's a really interesting concept, like this idea that you kind of like have to be alone and survive on your own before you can like find
you have to know who you are and love yourself before you can love another person.
There's that cliche, you've seen it on Facebook a million times. It's your mom shared that.
Love yourself.
You gotta love yourself before you can love someone else. But yeah, it's fucking true. There's a reason your mom shared it on Facebook.
Well, I think we have a lot of examples in our own society too of when relationships become very codependent, and people literally can't live without the other. And I think this movie takes codependency to an extreme. This is saying that you have to have that and there's no other way. Or the loner's idea is that you have none of it.
Yeah.
Survive on your own.
And what we can, like, I always try to find kind of the balance in the middle. And yeah, I think the middle is, of course you should have love and connection. It's just not in the way that either of these groups have decided it should be, because nobody should decide it. It's up to you and the person that you want to be with, or the people that you want to be with.
So something also that I noticed is both of the groups reminded me a lot of high school. Because in high school you definitely had the people that were like, no, I'm single by choice. And then you also had the people that would use someone committing suicide as their opportunity to hit on somebody, like
or force someone into a relationship.
Yeah, it's something that that I feel like, again, it's a very like cynical and satirical take on society, because I assume that it's not about high school. I assume it's about dating as an adult.
Well, even then, they have dances.
That's true. Yeah, I guess you're right. Yeah,
like the dances.
They treat them like children.
Yeah,
they do.
It's very immature, like the way both handle.
Well, those examples. What was it like? When you're single and like when you're with a couple, like the dude was like choking on the food when he was single and he just died.
Yeah,
it was really weird how
demonstrations.
those demonstrations were really weird.
Like propaganda.
Yeah, it was.
This is what a person in our society acts like.
Yeah.
Yes.
Please do.
And you know, there's a really interesting character, and I actually know this because the maid, who kind of like eventually goes over.
The double agent.
Yeah. I know that she's actually the director's wife, because they both did a Criterion Closet thing. I don't know if you guys watch those videos on YouTube. They'll have like directors and actors go into the Criterion Closet, which is like a bunch of art house movies, and like pick movies and talk about them. There's a lot of really good ones. Michael Cera does one. You've seen that meme where he's like, "Call me, that's me. Let's talk about it." It's from that video. But the maid character is really interesting to me, just because like she's one of the bigger mysteries in the movie. Like I'm not exactly sure where she stands in relation to a lot of like the themes and things like that. She might just be like a convenient, like a plot operator, right? But at the same time, like she's killed, right? She's killed by Rachel Weisz's character, basically, but also like by Lea Seydoux' character,
by the leader,
the leader. And like
it's really fucked up.
And also, I think one of the funnier jokes, it's like awkward to talk about. Like one of the funnier jokes is when he's like, "It's horrible," and she's like, She's like, "It's hard," and she's like, "Good job," and he's like, "No, just a little bit more." And she's like, "No," and he's like, "It's terrible."
This is
She's
awful.
like just walking away. He's like, "That's awful."
That's awful.
Like, why would you do this to me?
That's one of the few times that he like shows emotion, right? It's like, I can't believe it. I can't.
Well, man, like even when he was just very monotone. He's just like, "That's awful," and he just like watches her go.
Mm-hmm. Well, and they're showing that like they use sex as torment in this movie, and you can't masturbate in the hotel society.
But you can in the loner.
You can in the loner, but then you can't be with anybody, and you can't have sex. So both of these societies use sex to control people. And I think that adds to the overall desperate tone, because as the movie goes on, you can see the characters becoming more and more desperate and trying to use whatever faculties they have to be able to kind of successfully leave this hotel and live. But yeah, I don't know where else I was going with that. But, sex is fun.
I think that the idea, because like the only other thing I can think of for why they would do that with like having the maid come in and like grind up on him was that they wanted to make sure he could get hard and make sure that he's like straight, I guess.
Oh, she was testing his
virility.
Yeah.
But I'm also thinking that like that will make him want to go fuck somebody. So then he's gonna go out and try twice as hard because
that's what I was thinking.
He's not allowed to.
She says that, right? She's like, "This is you don't understand.
This is good for you."
This is good for you.
Psychologically, she
then
says
you'll
psychologically.
want it more.
Exactly.
Get that release.
Yeah. And because in this place, it would be so easy to just fall into despair and throw yourself off of a building. So they need to give
with
people
butter
like
biscuits.
you need to
butter biscuits in hand.
There's butter biscuits by the window, and
What
you
if
just
like
grab them and
what
go.
if butter biscuits was like her blood? Like that was also
Yeah, that wasn't blood. That was just like jam.
It was
with
her
butter
whole
biscuits.
identity.
Literally,
Oh my
I think in the
God.
credits she's like credited as butter biscuits
Yeah.
lady.
Yeah,
But
I think
the identity thing too, I think that actually makes a lot of sense because when she's trying to get the David to like her, she literally like gives him butter biscuits. She gives him her identity and is like here, take this, you know,
Your dog
and
will
doesn't
love
really
it.
give him an option. And then he rejects it, and then she tries to kill herself.
Yeah. Well, even when they were introducing themselves at the very beginning, they had like what was it? It's like their unique. Like I forget. They had like this is my.
Oh,
special-
yeah,
yeah, they
special
go up, they
attributes.
go up on the mic. The new people go up on the stage to introduce themselves to everybody in the hotel, and this is their moment to like kind of sell themselves.
yeah.
And so one of the girls is like, my defining characteristic
Defining
is that I have a
characteristic.
very great smile or
And
something.
she just like smiles in front
Yeah,
of
she's
everyone.
just
Yeah,
like,
I think
good.
also
I'm
'cause
smiley girl.
It was the limp guy, and then the butter biscuits lady went, and then it was the
I
smile
don't
lady.
know. I
went?
think
No,
it was just
but-
Smiley Lady and then it
Oh,
cut.
okay.
Yeah.
Never mind then. I was gonna say
What-
because I remember the person after him was very. They kept it very short, and his was very long. And I was thinking there might have been something there if it was a butter biscuits
Did
lady.
they show David's?
No.
Mm-mm.
Okay,
We didn't see
so we
his.
don't see what his
Yeah.
defining characteristic is before the short-sightedness, because he finds out later
Yeah.
with
Yeah.
Rachel Weisz.
Which is probably why you couldn't find anyone. It's like he didn't have a specific
He
He didn't know,
characteristic.
yeah.
So
Well,
it's-
well, the short-sighted thing is kind of just like a metaphor, right? Is really interesting. Like he can literally only see what's in front of him. So like, it makes sense that he would just like decide to be with the heartless lady because it's like, okay, I need to like I
Yeah.
have 3 days left. Like short-sighted.
It's
like
very
where do I
like
find it?
Yeah.
well, it's a very like what was I gonna say? It's like a short-sighted plan. Like it wasn't very thought out. It was just
Exactly.
like instinct. Like I need to do
interesting.
this to survive.
Absolutely, right? Let's talk a little bit about later on in the movie when, like, well, Rachel Weisz's character is blinded, right? We good?
Just making sure. Usually we stop around like 30 minutes, so I'm just making sure.
We're actually. Well, yeah, no, we're fine.
Okay.
Okay, we're good?
We're, give it like 5-10 more minutes.
For sure. Rachel Weisz's character is blinded.
Yes.
And then all of a sudden he's like thrown into and there's like that sequence where he's literally just like asking her like, do you like blueberries?
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah,
what else
he
do-
went
what
up
do we
like,
got?
what's
Yeah.
your blood type?
Yeah.
B walks away.
But what I find more interesting is that they couldn't find another commonality.
Yeah.
How is that? Like, like,
Which then
that's
I guess
really
that
society
kind of
is.
leads into the final scene, and that leads more to like that he would have done it because that's the only thing they have in common, and he desperately wants to have something in common. So
Well, it's interesting, right? You would think that, well, and again, it's because of like the world that's built in this movie. There needs to be that one thing,
Yeah.
right? Like he's still in that mindset of like the hotel where it's like, okay, here's what's the one thing we have in common so that we can be a match, right?
yeah.
Whereas you think now that he's like escaped that hotel and he's like lived in the wilds, he wouldn't need that because they were like super in love, right? They were like communicating and they had all this stuff together.
They were building things, like,
Which makes you
as
think,
a couple.
Which makes you think that like it might just be like him, he might just be shitty and like.
And I
not
think
capable.
that speaks to how powerful propaganda can be.
Yeah, super insane.
That was deeply rooted in their consciousness that we must have this weird thing in common to build a successful relationship. And even when they get out of that system, they can't change their brains enough to get over that hump to then start their new lives.
Yeah. It's so crazy.
It's a weird system.
So one thing I want to talk about before we end the podcast is the very beginning, like before the title shows up. It just has this lady that I can't remember if it's one of the characters from the film or
Just some random lady.
and she's just driving down the road, and then she pulls over, gets out, and kills one of 2 donkeys.
Yeah.
I was smiling the entire time, by the way,
Yeah.
because I've seen this before. I knew what was gonna happen, and I was kind of like looking over at Louis to see what he was doing, just like
Yeah,
That
it's
was
going-
kinda,
that's always
yeah, because
okay.
well, again, it opens up with a really, really long shot of her just driving, and I'm like, what's going on?
Yeah.
It's like, and like I don't know what I'm getting myself into yet, so I'm not like scared yet. But rewatching it, I would be if I knew the kind of shit that happens in this movie. Watching someone drive down the road would be very intense. But then I was kind of just like, what the fuck? But because it's definitely like a couple, right?
Yeah.
The two donkeys, you think?
Because the one donkey after the other one died, kind of.
Yeah.
Hey, what's up, buddy?
Yeah, like get the fuck up. What's wrong with you?
It was like a companionship.
Yeah.
I don't know why I was reading into it that like for what it like maybe. Well, one, why would both the couples be turned into donkeys, right? Because it's only the single people.
Well, and if they were a couple, they wouldn't be turned into an animal.
Animals. That's one thing. But then also, for whatever, like, why would you shoot a donkey?
Yeah.
Right? Like,
Yeah,
why
why
would you
the
shoot the person?
That's why I loved
and
it.
like, I think the reason that I like, and I think that's also like a primer for like, okay, you're gonna have to just assume a lot of shit. Like you're just gonna have to like figure a lot of this out on your own.
Go with it.
Yeah, like there's a lot of detachment. There's like you're gonna have to fill in the blanks.
Yes.
But my answer is that like that was like an ex or something, or someone who maybe like a divorced husband or something, right? And also the fact that it's a jackass, right? Like it starts with a woman shooting a jackass, right? Like
and Olivia Colman in that movie when he's like, I want to be a lobster, and she tells him he tells him the plan and everything. She's like, if you're an animal, you can find another mate and you can go on and you can live, your animal life with a mate. So maybe the other donkey was now
They have a commonality.
ex-husband's. Like
They're
her
both
ex-husband
donkeys.
is now with this real donkey.
That
And
also,
she's like, son of a bitch, you're cheating on me with that.
Yeah,
with that.
that brings up another thing, that he chose a lobster. And then his reasoning for choosing a lobster was that he wanted to live a long life. And
100 years.
Yes.
And they are very virile throughout. Yeah, which is all very like selfish stuff, right?
Yeah, I thought that was interesting because like basically, what I took from that is that his life is very important to him. Because the first like number one reason is because they live for a long time, and he wants to live for a long time. Which, like you said, is like a very selfish thing. And then we see these, but then I also get the feeling that like that's kind of whatever. If anyone else had given it more thought, they wouldn't have picked a dog. They would have picked something that lives longer.
Well, I feel like a lot of people pick dogs because like you'll keep a dog around.
Yeah,
Like,
that's true. Yeah.
Someone will love me.
Yeah, exactly, right.
And
like
we do love dogs so much that it's like we feel like dogs are kind of human in some way. Like I know I feel that way about my dog sometimes. I'm like, this is a person.
Yeah.
But
Man's best friend.
yeah, so like of course we want to be more like a person if we can.
Yeah. I thought it was really funny that the girl with the pretty hair chose a pony with like really pretty hair. That was a good fit.
Yeah, that was weird.
Okay, wait. Are we gonna stop once we hit 30 minutes?
It's already past 30 minutes, but we had interruptions and stuff. So I mean, we could start wrapping it up now.
Okay. Well, just because before we wrap it up, I think I have one question for everyone. If you had to be turned into an animal because you were single in this dystopia,
I was gonna ask everybody this after the podcast.
Yeah. Well, no, I think let's include it on the podcast. It's fine. Which animal would you be?
Oh wow.
You guys, you don't necessarily have to say why, but yeah, we can have.
This is where you might have to cut it because we're gonna put some thought into this.
Yeah, I
Is
think we
this
should.
assuming that I keep like my same consciousness and memories and stuff?
I think so. Yeah,
Okay.
it seemed like the
That
dogs,
seems like the rules of
The
the
dogs seem to
movie.
have the
Yeah.
consciousness.
They didn't
right?
specify. They were pretty unclear though about what your mind state would be as an animal.
Yeah, it's not. Well, again,
Because I don't think they actually turned people into animals. I don't think that actually happened.
Well, yeah, I guess it's not a for sure thing, but there's like the transformation room, which also that's like a connection to like Franz Kafka, which like Kafka is a big influence, just like the deadpan, like societal, like satire kind of thing. That's obviously like, kind of like a reference there. Yeah. But anyways, let's think about it for a little bit. Okay. All right. So, which animal would everyone be? If you're living in this dystopia, you check into the hotel. What animal are you going to turn into when you don't find your mate?
I'm going last. That's for damn sure.
Okay. You said some kind of bird?
Yeah, I think I would pick a flying bird just because then I could like go anywhere, anytime, and do whatever I want.
Sounds pretty good.
And
Yeah, see a few places.
Yeah.
I'd probably do bear, mostly because I'm wearing a bear shirt right now. But also just like that existence seems pretty chill, you know? Just like
Very powerful creature.
big creatures, very powerful. You just kind of eat honey and fish, chill, hibernate. Oh man, sleep for 6 months? Yes. Sign me up.
Grog state afterwards. And I would have to consult, if I were to actually make this decision, I would have to consult National Geographic and textbooks.
yeah.
I would do some studying.
Obviously,
but,
do some research. But
first thing that comes to mind, dolphin.
okay.
Oh, yeah,
Because
That's a
dolphins
good
are
one.
very intelligent and they also have sex for pleasure. So.
That's true. That's true. Bears only fuck for business.
I'm gonna go with what you did. I'm gonna go for a spider because that's the one I'm wearing,
Nice.
and also I can put the fear of God in everyone.
Yeah, a lot of people. Just
So that's my animal, insect, whatever the fuck it is.
All right. So that was our discussion of The Lobster.
The hat.
We are going to choose now our movie for next week, or that movie for next week. I may or may not be participating in that one.
Well,
Do you wanna
why
do
don't
it
you
with
choose,
your guess?
Marty? Because
Yeah, okay, I'll choose since I'm the guest.
All right.
It'll be fun. Here. Please be hereditary. Please be hereditary. Or I wouldn't be surprised if
Well, you're gonna be here.
If it is, I'm fucking done.
Snowpiercer's on Hereditary. Oh, it's actually Burning, which is the Korean movie with Steven Yeun that none of you heard about.
Well, that's gonna be
unfortunately.
great.
Yeah,
Alright.
it's supposed to be really good. I don't know. I've never seen it, but it's supposed to be excellent.
You've never seen it, and you put it.
It's because I was like, I want to watch that movie. I
It's on the
keep on
list.
seeing it on Netflix, and I'm like, I would watch
Where
that.
the fuck are we gonna find that?
Let's all
It's
know.
on Netflix.
Let's know
Is it?
nothing about
Oh,
it
okay.
when we get it.
Yeah, maybe this is one of those ones, like your first
Just
blind
mystery.
podcast where no one knows, and you just talk about it.
Right?
Blind.
Sergio's
You said it's
probably-
on Netflix?
It's absolutely on
Sergio's
Netflix.
probably seen it. So
Probably.
He knows the whole history.
Sergio's
behind
seen
it.
pretty much everything.
yeah.
All right, well, that's been this week's GarageCast. The Lobster 2015, Yorgos Lanthimos. This was Marty checking in, subbing in for Sergio, who's in Mexico again. If you need to find him, he's in Mexico. I don't know what else happened for the outros.
That's really
Thanks
it.
for watching.
Thank you. No, fuck you for watching. Don't watch it.
Wow.
Keep the discussion going in the comments as always. Tell us that we're stupid and that
Yeah.
we're reading
Yeah.
too much into it,
Absolutely.
or not.
Hi, Angela.
Because people do it plenty on our outside lives.
I need to.
Yeah.
I need to be humble.
I mean, they don't tell me I'm smart.
Well, good for you.
I'm going to Berkeley as well.
And yeah, that's about it.
Yeah.